Robbie Lawler was out of control.
This is Double Cross, the murder of Robbie Lawler.
It was going to be an all-out war with him in the middle of it.
A Crime World special investigation podcast based on my new book, Web of Betrayal, wherever you get your podcasts.
So, by their nature, any children or adolescents who come to the Camhs service are vulnerable and in difficulty. It's just the way it is, Ali. But obviously, for one of those children, one of those vulnerable children, to be abused in the offices of the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services is, it's particularly shocking. Tell us, Ali, when you first came across this case, because I know you covered it for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, we've covered it, I think now for over a year. So I kind of got a tip off about it, I suppose. And we went to court just over a year ago now. And this man, Mr. Yunos, was charged with a number of sexual offences against a young girl who was known to him. Now, she wasn't actually a patient of his.
Yeah.
This is kind of an interesting part of it. She wasn't a patient of his. I think the families were known to each other, but a lot of the abuse happened in his Camhs office in Clonskee, where he essentially would have been one of a number of doctors who were in charge of, like, literally the most vulnerable children in the state. I mean, it's very difficult for your child to even be referred to Camhs. Like, it's the waiting list is huge. I think it was 11,000 or so last year, children being treated there. But it's really for children who, have serious mental health problems, that they need to be seen by a medic.
It's effectively for people that are in dire situations, emergency cases.
It's the most serious, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot of these children, would require medication. A lot of these children would have had suicide attempts. Like, it's the vast majority of cases of children who are experiencing mental health problems are dealt with by psychologists. But to be referred to an actual a medical doctor it's at the higher end of a child who's experiencing serious difficulties.
Yeah. So obviously, this doctor, and I'll read out his full name and probably pronounce it wrong, but it's Amirul Ant bin Mohd Yunos. As he said, he's a 38-year-old doctor who's working for Camhs. And when you hear the details of this case, he was given an 8.5-year sentence. It's a very determined and violent sex assaults that began with grooming and really escalated. What age was this young girl when she first sort of came in contact with him?
Yeah, so she was only 14 when she came in contact with him, and Mr. Yunos' family and this girl's family were kind of known to each other, and she was experiencing, I think, like very mild anxiety after COVID, and I think her parents asked Yunos, would he have any recommendation? And like, it was a very low level situation. She was just a little bit anxious, like I think lots of teenagers or lots of children and adults were after COVID. So they were looking essentially for him to suggest a psychologist or someone who might be good for her to talk to. And he said, I'll do it. I'll talk to her. And they were like, I don't, they didn't think that was necessary, but they agreed to let her have one session with him. And they sat in on that session. And the parents then, their understanding was after that was it. Like, it was not to continue, and then they were looking elsewhere to see if they could get her kind of help elsewhere. But then, kind of unbeknownst to them, unfortunately, Yunos kept in contact with their daughter and began to meet her. And grooming really is the only way to describe what happened for a year before. These really violent sexual attacks, like we're talking as bad as it can be, vaginal, anal, oral, and her feeling very threatened, her being blindfolded, it's and there's been a lot of surprise that he wasn't charged with rape, that he was charged under a slightly different offence, you know?
Yeah. So obviously
yeah.
from day one, like obviously after the first time he met her, that grooming process began, and you can see it in the evidence given and in the interview that you've done with her family, where straight away he tells her, he makes contact with her privately and tells her not to tell her parents. And that's really how it began and continued to go. I mean, they gave amazing, shocking details about how he would smuggle her into the Camhs office and abuse her there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was probably one of the most disturbing things that they kind of relayed to me was that, yeah, so he worked in the Camhs office in Clonskee, and he would have her come out to that office and had essentially kind of drawn her a map of how to sneak into the office to see him, and it would involve her kind of crawling under a ramp, for a disability ramp that was in place to kind of so that she wouldn't be seen on the cameras coming in, because I mean she wasn't a patient, so she'd no reason to be there. But I think any child who does go there always has to come with an adult, so there was that element as well. So it was these kind of extreme lengths that he went to kind of get her inside that building, and you know he was treating countless other children who probably were more vulnerable than this young victim as well, you know?
And like even in the description of the abuse that took place, like this girl's mother described, sort of the violent and sort of dominant undertones of it, or overtones even, as the case may be.
Oh, hugely so. I mean, you know, I think he told her body was a form of payment for his therapy service. I think I've mentioned this kind of blindfolding her as well. And I suppose I was most shocked to hear that the child has had to have internal surgery because of damage done, you know, as a consequence of these sexual attacks, you know. So it's kind of, look, I have to say now, I don't think I've ever come across a case where I've been as shocked by the appalling nature of it, kind of from start to finish, you know.
Yeah,
Like,
and I mean, obviously,
yeah.
this girl is vulnerable, and you know wouldn't be seeking any mental health support if that wasn't there. And he did sort of manage to, you know, which you do hear with victims constantly. You know, he got inside her head, and she almost felt sorry for him, and you know took on some of that blame as victims in these cases often do.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I mean, like, he was calling the abuse, I think, biology lessons. And he sent her violent pornography videos to study, was his word, before their next encounter. And I think the level of the violence in relation to the sexual attacks was escalating. And, you know, certainly her parents' view was that they don't know where it would have ended, because it was escalating to such an extent, and the kind of the grooming that he had begun with, buying her clothes. I think he was giving her money on some occasions. He'd take her out to eat, things like that, like all unbeknownst to her parents. And he did that for a full year before there was any sexual contact at all between them. So very predatory, and that's certainly the view of her parents, that he is an absolute predator. This wasn't, not that there's ever any kind of excuse for any sexual assault or attack, but the level of almost planning, I think, is particularly disturbing in this case. I felt that anyway.
And when, Ali, did it start to come to light? Like, or how did the girl make a report, or was it through her parents?
Well, she eventually, so after the last attack in the Camhs office in Clonskee where he worked, she, just before that happened, she was getting a bus out to see him there, kind of under his instruction, essentially. And she sat on the bus, and she found herself unable to get off the bus for a while. So she went further than she should have. And then, so I think at that point, she herself was, you know, felt that it was just coming to a head. So then after So she went in, that again smuggled in by him, essentially crawling under ramps, etc., to get in the back of the building. After that attack, when she left, she contacted a friend online, essentially, who was also a medic, basically, and she revealed that to that person, and then kind of the wheels were put in motion then of her. She was taken to hospital then later, and then within a couple of days she spoke to her. She revealed to her parents what had been happening.
I mean, it's truly, really, really horrific. And obviously the sentence is a, relatively long sentence for in an Irish court, given the charges he pled guilty to, which are 6 counts of engaging in a sexual act with a child under 17, and 1 count of sexual exploitation of a child, and 1 of meeting a child for the purposes of sexual exploitation. I mean, what do we know about Dr. Yunos? He's originally from Malaysia. Had he worked for Camhs for long? Did he train in Ireland?
Yeah, so he is originally from Malaysia. He's a married man. He was living in Dublin 15. His wife wasn't living with him. She was back in Malaysia, but he had other family in Ireland who he was living with. And yeah, he appears to have trained here and essentially got, I think, most of his qualifications anyway here. In terms of how long he was working for Camhs, I'm not quite sure, but I think it was certainly, I think, a year or 2 at least. And yeah, like I think he was kind of a man of high standing, I suppose, in Malaysia. Like, I think his family would have been quite well known. I think they have some links to some kind of very influential people over there. Some of his family were present in court. I think his mother had actually come over from Malaysia for his sentencing a couple of weeks ago.
Now he will be deported back to Malaysia, I think, when his sentence is served. Amazingly, I suppose his wife has told the court, or it's been said in court, that she's gonna stand by him, and when he comes back to Malaysia, take him back into our family, really.
Yeah, I mean, there was testimony from, like, as in statements provided to the court from several members of his family, including his wife, about how they continued to support him. And I think he's been in custody now for 14 months. I don't think they were married a particularly long time, and obviously they didn't live in the same country. He certainly had. There were statements from. They weren't all read out, but the judge had just said that she'd read them, and it was from people who, like I say, would be of very high standing in Malaysia, but they wouldn't mean nothing. It would mean nothing to us about who these people might be. But he certainly enjoys the support of his family, 100%.
Like, obviously, these cases are shocking in of themselves, but it's his connection with the child and adolescents mental health services that pushes this to another level. What have Camhs said about it, and is there further investigations to see if there was any other issues with his patients, really?
Yeah, so the HSC I obviously contacted them about it, just to see what was going on, like, in terms of their own internal investigation. And they couldn't say much during, when he was before the courts, before sentencing. And they have said since to me that there was obviously a full internal investigation, which you would automatically expect. And they've said essentially that they haven't found any issues, I suppose, any other children have come forward alleging similar behavior. So, I mean, like, it's obviously these are child patients. They're entitled to privacy. We've no right to kind of find out any more, I suppose. But you would have to hope that after he was initially charged 14 months ago, that every single one of his patients' parents or guardians were contacted and asked to I mean, it must be a huge concern for, for parent. Imagine if he was the doctor treating your child who's obviously got a significant mental health problem, and to suddenly see he's charged with all these terrible offences. I mean, it's the stuff of nightmares when, for parents.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and of course, when you're dealing with adolescents, which a lot of the people who use that service would be, it can be very hard to get a clarity out of them anyway about what's going on in their lives. I mean, like Camhs, it has to be said, are a brilliant service. I mean, the only criticism you could have of Camhs is that it's so difficult for people to access it, which is obviously not their fault. It's a grossly underfunded service.
For sure. Yeah. No, I think that the waiting list is massive.
But when people do get in there, they do speak very complimentary, and this Dr. Yunos's crimes doesn't reflect on the service that they offer to vulnerable
100%.
kids.
Yeah. I mean, it's just look, it's just so obviously it's so terrible and unfortunate, this case, and the crimes this man was capable of, and the kind of the cunning nature he had to carry out these crimes, I think is just like at the highest level, and I mean, he wasn't charged with rape. Is definitely I know some of the legal people involved in the case, and some of kind of senior Gardaí involved in the case were very surprised that he wasn't charged with rape. But like ultimately, that's a matter for the DPP,
Yeah.
But I think one of the worst things about it all I found was that this was a child who had mild anxiety, and then, which I'm sure could have been easily managed had she had appropriate medical care. But now this child is a patient in a hospital, a psychiatric patient in a hospital. She's, had numerous suicide attempts, including I think 3 in the week that he was sentenced a couple of weeks ago. She's got serious issues around food and eating as well. I think a possible kind of eating disorder, because I think her mother said to me that she didn't want to eat. She didn't want to put on weight, because when he was abusing her, as in Dr. Yunos, that he would encourage her to eat more so that her body would develop, so her breasts would be fuller and other parts of her body. So she now doesn't eat properly. She doesn't sleep. Like she's 17 now. But the damage done to that child's life is kind of immeasurable, and all we can do is hope that she will recover.
Absolutely. I mean, it's horrific, and the long-term effects are there, but hopefully at least the family will get some sort of relief from the fact that he has been named and received a significant prison sentence.
Yeah, and I mean, look, the family, they're really lovely people, really decent, good people, and it's just it's horrendous what happened to them, and it wasn't through any negligence of theirs. It was through kind of utter manipulation,
Yeah.
that this man, unfortunately, this predator, really managed to do so much damage,
Okay, Ali, a very tough case, and thanks very much for coming on.
Not at all. Thanks a million, Niall.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.